Struggling to keep your appetite under control? It's not in your head. It's probably related to your thyroid. It's very common for thyroid patients to experience dysregulated hunger cues, causing them to eat more than they should and to gain weight. These hunger cues stem from the impact that thyroid hormone has on different hormones and systems inside of the body. The good news is that you can actually take control of these hunger cues and get both your appetite and your weight under control. We'll talk about how to do that in just a second, but before we do, let's have a quick discussion on the different types of hunger that you might experience. And you need to understand each of these because each one is treated a little bit differently. Hunger usually stems from one or more of the following reasons. Number one is an empty stomach. This type of hunger occurs first, and it occurs when your stomach starts to empty. Even though it occurs first, it tends to be weaker in terms of its magnitude on your brain and your impact on eating. Number two is called metabolic demand. This is a real true sense of hunger, and it stems from your body's need for nutrients. This type of hunger can be very strong. Number three would be psychological needs. This is a false sense of hunger that does not stem from a need for nutrition. It's triggered by emotions, stress, habits, and so on. And number four is mismanaged hunger signals from hormone imbalances. The hormones responsible for regulating your hunger include leptin, ghrelin, and peptide YY. Your thyroid has the ability to impact every single one of these different types of hunger, and its influence can be different from person to person. This means that managing your specific hunger cues will require you to do a little bit of digging to figure out what's going on in your body. It's not as hard as it might seem though, and here are some tips to help you figure it out. Let's start with some of the basics because these are things that everyone should be doing if they're struggling with their appetite. Number one is to make sure that you're drinking enough water. I put this as number one because it's so obvious and yet so many people miss it. In fact, studies show that as many as 30% of people confuse the sensation of thirst for the sensation of hunger. In other words, many people believe that they are hungry when they're actually thirsty. The reason for this is that the same part of the brain that regulates hunger is the same part of the brain that regulates thirst, and the magnitude of the signals from each are very weak. Your brain can then get further confused when you start to throw in 0-calorie sweetened drinks into the mix. Your brain gets confused because it senses sweetness, but there are no calories associated with it. The solution to this problem is actually quite simple. Simply drink water when you feel that you're hungry and allow that to settle for 20 to 30 minutes. If your hunger is actually real, then it will not subside. But on the other hand, if you are actually just thirsty, then you will have a resolution in your hunger. Number two, make sure you're eating enough protein. Protein is an incredibly satiating macromolecule, more so than even fat or carbohydrates. This is because it has a greater stimulating effect on appetite suppressing hormones like GLP-1, cholecystokinin, and peptide YY. On top of this, protein is necessary to build and maintain healthy muscle mass. Because of the connection between your muscle mass and thyroid function, you never want to skimp on protein. More muscle mass will mean better thyroid function, which will mean better appetite and better metabolism control. You should be getting around 60 grams of animal protein each day or 100 grams of plant-based protein each day. Plant protein has a slightly different amino acid composition compared to animal protein, meaning you will need to get a little bit more of plant sources if you want to equal the same benefit that animal protein provides. Number three, make sure you're actually hungry and not eating in response to your emotions. This is more common than you might realize, and it's tied to the connection between your brain, your thyroid, and your emotions in a pretty complicated web. In a nutshell, here's how it works. The sensation of hunger leads to negative emotions. Negative emotions include things like anger, sadness, loneliness, jealousy, fear, and so on. This, by the way, is why some people end up hangry when they're hungry. These negative emotions are very problematic because they increase your risk of overeating or undereating. The more you overeat or undereat, the more likely you are to experience negative emotions, and the cycle continues. Your thyroid gets involved here because it can regulate your mood. Hypothyroidism all by itself can cause problems like mood swings, weight gain, a decreased metabolism, and changes for food cravings. The less control you have over thyroid function, the more likely you are to experience negative emotions. And thus, the more likely you are to have less control over your appetite. The bottom line, if you are hungry, pay attention to your emotions. Are negative emotions influencing your hunger cues? Is it related to your mood? Is it related to your environment? Are you just eating because everyone else is eating? If so, your emotions are hijacking your hunger cues and taking over. Number 4, if you're still hungry after a meal, make sure to fill up on vegetables. You can easily control your appetite by filling your stomach full of healthy, nutritious foods. Green leafy vegetables are full of nutrients, they're low calorie, and they're filling. These fiber-rich foods contain compounds that are slowly digested, support your gut health, and exert an influence on gut-related appetite-controlling hormones. Filling your stomach full of these leafy vegetables also puts pressure on the stretch receptors inside of your stomach. This sends signals to your brain that you are truly full. On top of all of this, they're so low in calories that it's hard to overeat on vegetables. You're never going to run into problems by topping off a meal with extra steamed broccoli or steamed cauliflower. But doing this will definitely help control your hunger cues and make you healthier in the process. These 4 tips are really just the basics, but you can get into more advanced ways to control your appetite, which is what we're going to be talking about next. Number 5, you need to optimize your thyroid. No matter what, you must do this step. If your thyroid is responsible for hunger and food cravings, optimizing thyroid function will be necessary to solve this problem. For most people, this means getting a complete thyroid lab evaluation and maybe getting on thyroid medication. I've talked a lot about how to test your thyroid, so I'll leave links in the description below if you want to check a video out on that topic. If you are somebody who is taking thyroid medication and still experiencing issues related to your hunger, then further optimization of your thyroid medication dose is likely necessary. This is not uncommon, by the way, as many thyroid patients who are taking thyroid medication are actively being underdosed. And further, many thyroid patients are not using the right combination of thyroid hormones. Getting a complete thyroid lab test panel will tell you if you need to make adjustments to your thyroid medication dose. And if you don't like the idea of taking thyroid medication, there are plenty of things that you can do naturally to improve thyroid function as well. Making changes to your diet, exercising regularly, and using the right thyroid support supplements can all help. It doesn't really matter how you do it, just make sure that you optimize for thyroid function. My personal recommendation would be to use a combination of thyroid medications with lifestyle changes and thyroid supplements on top. Number 6, make sure to check your leptin level. Leptin is a hormone that is secreted by your fat cells, and its purpose is to act as a communicator between your fat cells and your brain. When everything is working properly, leptin will tell your brain to reduce appetite and increase metabolic rate. Unfortunately, thyroid problems leads to a dysfunction in the signaling of leptin. This means thyroid patients are more prone to develop a condition called leptin resistance. If you are leptin resistant, your brain will be resistant to the signal that your fat cells are sending it. This means that instead of decreasing your appetite and increasing your metabolism, your brain will actually increase your appetite and decrease your metabolism. This is just another way that your thyroid can indirectly impact your appetite. And this form of hunger can be very difficult to treat because it stems from an imbalance in a powerful hormone. The good news is that you can easily check if you have leptin resistance by getting a fasted serum leptin level. If your fasted serum leptin level is elevated when you test, and you are already overweight, and you are unable to lose weight, then the diagnosis of leptin resistance can be made. But remember, all of these things must be true. The treatment for leptin resistance is to resensitize your brain to leptin levels. Doing this will then allow leptin to do its job inside of your brain, which will help balance and normalize hunger cues. The tricky part here is that treating leptin resistance will require that you also treat and optimize your thyroid. So make sure that you pay attention to thyroid function in addition to whatever treatments you're already doing for leptin resistance. Number 7, try natural appetite suppressants. If you are having trouble controlling your hunger and you're not really sure where it's coming from, you can always lean on natural appetite suppressants as support. The natural appetite suppressants we're about to discuss all work a little bit differently and can be very powerful. Here are a few of my favorites. The amino acid L-glutamine. Taking 2 to 5 grams of L-glutamine every day can naturally suppress your appetite and also help improve gut health. The viscous fiber Glucomannan. Glucomannan expands when it's introduced to water, which can trigger stretch receptors in the stomach. It's a great supplement to take before a meal, and it can also be used throughout the day if you find that you're getting hungry. The next is 5-HTP. 5-HTP is a serotonin precursor which can help manage hunger cues at the level of the brain. And the last one is Berberine. I primarily recommend berberine for weight loss purposes, but there are plenty of people who take it who also report that it helps suppress their appetite. And number 8, if all else fails, you may want to consider prescription medications. You have to be very careful about this option though, because prescription medications are always associated with some side effects. Yes, they do work, but you have to make sure that you weigh the pros and cons in your individual case to make sure that they're worth it. I'm personally not a big fan of recommending prescription appetite suppressants due to the fact that they're associated with multiple side effects and because the natural options are still pretty powerful, but there are some situations in which they can be considered. Some of the most popular prescription appetite suppressants include pretty much any stimulant, including things like phentermine or Adderall. These are definitely not ideal for long-term use, but they may be helpful in certain short-term scenarios. If you use them, you have to watch out for issues such as insomnia, high blood pressure, and heart palpitations. The second on the list would be GLP-1 agonists. This would include the very popular weight loss medications like Wegovy or semaglutide. Even though these medications do help you lose weight, these medications may be associated with an increased risk of thyroid cancer, as well as a loss of muscle mass, so be very cautious if you consider using these. And the last one is naltrexone. Low doses of naltrexone in the range of 4.5 to 13.5 milligrams can help suppress appetite and may actually reset the body's set point. You can always consider using prescription medications if you want, but I would strongly recommend that you try the other more natural approaches first. Unfortunately, issues related to your appetite often come hand in hand with weight gain. If you are somebody that has been struggling with your weight and you believe that it's related to your thyroid, then I'd recommend checking out this video next. It walks you through how to lose weight with hypothyroidism in a step-by-step way.